In today's episode, we're going to be going over what does a day look like in the life of a Marine Corps. We're going to be talking about why the Marines versus the Army or the Air Force. We're going to be talking about what did boot camp look like. We're going to be talking about what does deployment look like. We're going to be talking about different challenges, lessons, day-to-day, drill instructor, etc. To help us with that, we have Dylan Hernandez, who actually retired today, right?
Yeah.
And he's going to be walking us through this. So welcome to the show, Dylan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love it. So I've never done an episode like this where I interview somebody on like what the Marines or what the Army or what the Air Force is like, but I've always been curious about it. I never obviously participated. However, like you have. So why, let's start off there. Like why the Army versus the Air Force or why the Marines basically?
Yeah. So for me, I always knew I wanted to serve in some capacity. And honestly, the Marine Corps kind of just fell in my lap. Because long story short, my best friend, he knew he wanted to join since he was like 9. And he went and talked to the recruiter, and then he came to my house. He's my best friend, still my best friend to this day. And he came over and was just telling me about his talk with the recruiter. And I was sitting there as we're going into our senior year. I didn't have anything necessarily planned, even though like it was the standard college stuff. But when he told me about the Marine Corps and was telling me about everything the recruiter's telling him, I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna join the Marine Corps with you. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna join with you. And next week the recruiter was telling me about it, and found out, hey, it's the best of the best. And I was like, well, if I'm going to be part of a military branch, I want to be part of the best, So next week, recruiter was there and signing papers, and probably the easiest applicant that he ever had.
Really? So let me ask you this: like, when you say the best of the best, like in serving, like why is the Marine considered or the best of the best?
Yeah, so when it comes to the Marine Corps, I mean, we're known as, America's 911. We're the first to deploy. We have a 24-hour ability to respond if we have a national threat or anything like that. And so in doing so, like we're known as, the people that are going in first and taking care of business. And so just the capabilities that we have with the little budget that we have. So we're known for doing the most with the least, if that makes sense. We've got the smallest budget. We're the smallest branch in the military, but it's kind of like, the Spartans, we make things happen with no matter what our numbers are.
What were you like before you joined the Marine Corps? And what would you say were like some like things that you learned or how did it impact your life basically?
For sure. So when I was in high school, I was a tennis player. I was in the band for a little bit. AP classes. Someone would call me like more of a nerdy kid. Didn't really have confidence in speaking with people and stuff like that. So. But then when I joined the Marine Corps, like I've always been competitive by nature, but when I joined the Marine Corps, it really showed me that I was capable of doing whatever I set my mind to. And so throughout my career, I just started, you get taught at a very early time in the Marine Corps in boot camp to, to be out there and set yourself apart and not be afraid to take a leadership role or take initiative. And so that throughout my career just was something that I took to heart, is if there was an opportunity, I was going to jump on it. And that's something that for me, as I carried on, into the real estate game, that continued to help me out.
Yeah, I love it. So what did the boot camp look like, man?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure every Marine can relate to this when it comes to, you get there, you get what's called the yellow footprints. It's the coveted yellow footprints, and you stand there and you have these drill instructors that are yelling at you, and you get, it's just a shock and awe. And you're like, what did I get myself into? And no, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it's always wrong. It doesn't matter, everything that you thought you knew is just taken away from you. Your sense of identity, there is no I, me, my. It's always this recruit, that recruit, these recruits. You're working as a team, so if one person gets in trouble, everyone's getting in trouble, because you learn accountability on a bigger scale. And you're really learning leadership at its core, because at the end of the day, you start to forget about yourself, because you're no longer using, I, me, my. It's us, we as a team. And so everything in Marine Corps recruit training is revolved around developing leaders.
That's funny. It's funny, Dylan. I got braces maybe like a week ago, or maybe like 3 weeks ago, and I thought the same thing. What did I get myself into?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I'm sure it's like at a completely different level. So how long was it? What do you know? Like the failure to success rate? Like, do a lot of people quit? And what does it look like? Like meaning like in terms of training,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with this because not only was I a recruit, but I was also went back to be a drill instructor. And in regards to like a day in the life as a recruit, when you get there, you wake up 05 on the dot. So 5 o'clock in the morning, getting yelled at, getting dressed, and everything's by the numbers. So it's not just, hey, get up and get dressed. It's you're getting up and they're telling you, okay, left boot on the body, ready, move, and they're counting you down, and you're counting down for everything you do. And so you get up, you get dressed, you go to chow, you have some sort of either physical training or some sort of classroom training, and then you go back to you go to lunch or afternoon chow. You have some sort of drill in between. Every time you're moving from one place, point A to point B, you're never just walking. You're in a formation. You're marching. And then in the afternoon, whatever you didn't have in the morning, you have in the afternoon. So if you had class in the morning, you have training in the afternoon, and vice versa. And then you have evening chow. Then after that, you either have some sort of drill or you have some sort of extra training after that. And then at 2100 at night, you get ready for bed essentially, and the drill instructors have a whole process to putting you to bed. And then exactly at 9 o'clock or 2100 at night, the lights are off and you're going to bed.
What do the drills look like? Is it like push-ups? Is it like swimming exercises? Is it like weight, like carrying stuff? Like
all of the above. So pretty
yeah.
much anything you can imagine, from hikes to runs to water survival. So we have a swim qual, we have rifle qual, actual marching. So there's marching movements, stuff like that. Everything has a purpose. So you don't do anything just on your own when you're a recruit. Like everything has its way of doing it. Everything has to be folded this way. It has to be held on this way. Everything is done in a specific manner, but it ranges from from running, swimming, climbing obstacles, obstacle courses, all the above.
Why do they have you guys do things like in such a specific manner, even to like folding things?
Because at the end of the day, attention to detail and the ability to follow direction is the difference between life and death. If you're forward deployed, and so if you're told to do something and you don't do it specifically in that manner, depending on what your job is, that could be someone's life that you're costing.
So basically, just yeah. Is there such thing as pass and fail in the boot camp? And if so, like what percentage of the people would you say fail and not make it through the boot camp? And how long is the boot camp as well, too? Is it like a week, a month?
So it's 12 weeks, so approximately 3 months of recruit training. In regards to the pass or fail rate, it continues to fluctuate. There's a lot of graduation requirements that you have to meet, and if you don't meet them, then you'll either get recycled. So you'll go to another company that's behind you in a training cycle, and you go through it again. Or if you're just not cutting it for whatever reasons, then you can get dropped. So it just kind of depends on the situation. If it's something that you can overcome, they'll just recycle you. But if not, then you'll get kicked out. And there's a whole process to that. But at the end of the day, the fastest way of getting out of the one thing that we tell our recruits is the fastest way to get out is to just graduate.
To basically just do it the first time, 7 days a week.
Yep. Yeah. So you're there. You get dropped off, and you are there from morning to night for 12 weeks.
Got it. Do they feed you guys?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, barely. But yeah.
That's good. Okay, cool. So, what did deployment look like, and what was that feeling like of being like deployed as well too?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of deployment. So there's multiple different types of deployments when it comes to the Marine Corps. So my first two were back-to-back, what they call Marine Expeditionary Units, where I was on an aircraft carrier. And so for us, we were showing a presence of force in the Pacific. So we went around. So Went to Japan, was in Japan for a few months, and then went on a ship where we essentially floated around the Pacific. We went to the Philippines, Korea, all around that area. And so for me specifically, I was doing my job, my occupational specialty, which at the time was essentially a mechanic for the support equipment for aircraft. And the best way I can explain that is if you've ever been to an airport and you see those little, we call them tugs, that are bringing the stuff around, the luggage around, that's the stuff that I had worked on. But yeah, so it just depends on what your job is and how it coincides with that deployment. And then on my third deployment, when I was in Turkey, that one we were just supporting the air support for the Middle East. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what your job is.
How do you determine what your job is? Do they go like based on what you're good at? Who determines that? And then what are the different jobs available for different people in the Marines?
Yeah, so there's tons of jobs when it comes to the Marine Corps. So before you enlist, you take what's called the ASVAB, which is a test that takes a look at multiple different things, and then you get a score on that. And based on what your score is, that shows you what you're eligible for in regards to your job or your occupational specialty. And then you choose a job or a job field. So for me, I picked aviation option. And then depending on what the needs of the Marine Corps are at that time, they'll give you your specific occupational specialty once you graduate boot camp and combat training. So you can choose it, and if you don't choose it, then it'll be chosen for you. And in most cases, you're not gonna like what gets chosen for you. So the best thing to do is get the best score you can.
To choose it.
Yeah, choose it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm imagining that test, what it does is it tells you what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. Exactly. And they probably put you on something that's related to your strengths, basically.
So in most cases, yes. So it will tell you what your strengths are and stuff. Not all the time will you get paired up with something that you're exactly the strongest in. But at the end of the day, whatever you get chosen, I mean, that's going to be your job. So you got to get good at it or you won't get promoted. So that point's kind of on you.
Got it. And then, what was there ever a time where you were like, what was the most challenging thing for you? And then what would you say was challenging for other people in being in the Marines?
Yeah, so the hardest things is time away from family and losing, loved ones. So the first big challenging thing for me was my son was born when I was on deployment. And so, pretty, newlyweds. Shortly after that, I got pregnant with my son. And shortly after that, found out I was getting deployed to Turkey. And watched my son get born via, Skype or whatever at the time. And so, like, that was, at the time, the hardest thing I'd ever gone through. It killed me not being able to be there and just watching my son literally be born through a phone screen. And then shortly after that, when I was in Turkey, they had what's called a coup, and my wife, pregnant wife, just had a son and doesn't have any communication with their husband who's deployed. And the news articles are saying, U.S. military held hostage, which, of course, that's the news. So it wasn't necessarily, didn't feel as bad as what they were reporting, but that at the time was pretty rough. And then the second hardest time was, aside from, the time that I was away from my family as a drill instructor was, here a few years ago when we pulled out of Afghanistan, and the 13 service members who were killed at the Abbey Gate, one of those was my recruit. So one of those was a Marine that I had made when I was a drill instructor. So I gave him his eagle, and anchor, and I was able to make him from a civilian to a Marine. And so finding out that he was one of the ones who was ultimately killed in action was a pretty hard hitting moment for me. I had lost some people beforehand, but not directly like that. And so his name was David Espinoza, and he was one of the 13, and never let anyone forget their names, so.
Damn, man. I'm sorry to hear that. It's crazy because, it's just a lot of things that us civilians don't get to experience or anything like that. What were like some great things, like maybe like a highlight, something that like stands out as something positive or something that went well?
Yeah, so when it came to the Marine Corps, I mean, it was filled with positive things that I will forever cherish. So for me, I had the opportunity to, because when it comes to your job, you also have the opportunity for other jobs. If that makes they call it
Mhm.
additional MOSs or military occupation specialties. So some of those that I've got over my time as a Marine was a martial arts instructor trainer. So I made martial arts instructors for the Marine Corps, a water survival instructor, which taught people water survival, and then ultimately a drill instructor, which makes Marines. And then at the end of that, I became a drill instructor, school instructor. So I made drill instructors. So all of that encompassed the ability to positively impact and train others. And so for me,
Mhm.
like that's something that I always held, near and dear to my heart, and I still do to this day, is the ability to teach others, to impart knowledge on others, to make a positive impact, which is ultimately why I got into real estate. After leaving or during my time of leaving the Marine Corps was because it was another opportunity to help people and make their lives better at the end of the day.
Yeah. Do you get to choose how long you serve for and what's like the minimum requirement? And then what's like the maximum as well too that you can do?
Yeah, so when it comes to the minimum requirement, typically it's a 4-year contract. So you're at least signed up for 4 years. Now, obviously, there are certain things that can force you out, whether it's disciplinary, you get in trouble, excuse me, or you get injured, something like that, and you don't have the capacity to serve in that capacity. And after that, when you're about a year out, you have the opportunity to re-enlist for another 4 years or 5 years, whatever that contract is, or you have the opportunity to get out. So for me, I reenlisted, and then I reenlisted twice, and ultimately for me, injuries started to pile up, and it became apparent that staying in the Marine Corps was not the best for not only me, but most importantly, my family. But you can go as long as you like. I mean, 30 years is on the high end, but typically people retire after 20.
What advice would you give to somebody looking to join the Marines?
So when it comes to the Marine Corps, I always advise, to go in there understanding that it's not about you and that you're serving a greater purpose. And if you go in with the mentality of, I'm going to do the best that I can at everything that I do, there's nothing that can hold you back. The problem is kind of like with anything, people get this high school like mentality of it's not cool to like the Marine Corps, it's not cool to be motivated about what you do, and they get into this weird funk that people just they complain. They're like the people that you see on the outside in the civilian world where they're just complaining about their job and not doing something about it, if that makes sense. And so my advice to anyone, whether it's Marines or, in any capacity, is just do the best that you can, regardless of what the circumstances is, because that's all you can control and you'll ultimately have a better life.
Yeah. What about like things coming back as a civilian now?
Mhm.
Like was there a transition period or was anything hard coming back from deployment or did you see anything that you wish you hadn't seen?
Yeah, so for me, the difficulty, like the deployment side of things, it was more the difficulty was reconnecting with the family. And I would say the same thing after being a drill instructor for 3 years, because being a drill instructor, that's a whole different mentality. Like it's hot, fast tempo. You're literally screaming for a living, and like your job revolves around yelling and being angry and correcting people and the whole nine. So then when you go from that to being back with family and being in a scenario where yelling is not normal, that was a pretty hard transition period. And when it came to getting out of the Marine Corps, one thing that I did that helped me a lot, I actually just made a video about it, is I did it 2 years before I got out. I started planning before 2 years before. And I think that's one thing that helped me a lot and correlated to me having, a relatively successful, quote unquote, transition, because for me, I had identified what I wanted to do before I got out and started actively pursuing it, got my real estate license while I was still in, and started, doing the job before I got out simultaneously. So I was a dual career, real estate agent and Marine. And so it allowed me to have a lot smoother transition, plus finding community with others. So like I found a veterans group that was close to me. So a lot of people, when they get out, the difficulty is that they don't have anyone to go to. There's no one that understands, because at the end of the day, Civilians can try the best they can, but they'll never understand the brotherhood or sisterhood when it comes to the military. So finding that community and planning it ahead of time helps
How has being in the Marines helped your real estate career?
tremendously. So for me, especially being a drill instructor, because again, there's so much structure to it, and there's a level of work ethic that very few people ever experience or even know they're capable of, just because of how much you get pushed in that job. And so for me, like when I got into real estate, it showed me like, or when I left the Marine Corps, left being a drill instructor, I was like, okay, I can accomplish anything that gets thrown at me. All I have to do is identify, okay, what are the leading indicators to that success? And so when I got into real estate, I was like, okay, what do I need to do? What are the leading indicators to make me a top agent? And it was contacts, it was, follow up, it was creating legitimate relationships with your clients. And so for me, it was just like, okay, these are the actions I need to take. I'm going to do them, and just have that self-discipline to go out there and actually do what's required. And I think that a lot of agents, one thing I noticed is the average agent just, the only reason why they're not successful is they're not willing to do those kind of things. And so the Marine Corps just gave me a level of discipline that I think very few people have or are willing to do, if that makes sense.
Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had not joined the Marines?
Oh yeah, I think about it all the time. It's like, I attribute, a lot of who I am today because of it. So as hard as it was, and as hard as some of the experiences that I've had were, like I wouldn't change it for anything, because it made me who I am today.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Anything else that you think would be helpful for our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is control the controllables. I mean, the only thing you have control over is yourself and how you respond to certain situations. And so you can sit there and complain about how bad it is, or how bad your business is in real estate, or whatever the case is. But if you just control what you can control, which is yourself, and you go out there, you make the contacts, you practice, you do your role play, you practice your scripts, you practice your presentation, you build the things that you can't control, which is yourself, you'll be successful regardless. It's just a matter of not making excuses and doing the work.
Got it. I love it, man. Well, I want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the show. For our viewers out there, we had Dylan Hernandez. We talked about what does a day look like in the life of a Marine. And we just went over like why the Marines, boot camp, deployment, challenges, the lessons day to day, and just different job occupations. I do want to say thank you for serving our country. Congratulations on retiring, and then congrats on all the success in real estate. Super happy for you. So if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you feel that this episode will be helpful, make sure to hit the share button. Thank you so much and appreciate you.